which we will talk about in a little bit. We all deserve a great government that is responsive to the needs of our fellow citizens. While others may debate whether government should be bigger or smaller, we focus on making it better. Since our founding in 2001, we have worked to make government more effective and efficient. Our nonpartisan stance allows us to collaborate with many different stakeholders who share our vision of a better government. We serve as a bridge between administrations across the political aisle and from government to private sector, bringing together different perspectives. For talent, we're helping government attract and keep mission critical talent. For leadership, we're developing strong leaders, equipping and empowering them with the skill set and mindset to improve government from the inside. And with reform, we're reimagining and rebuilding the systems and processes that make government work. So our agenda for today, we will be covering the following topics. Federal government overview. So this section will just focus on level setting. We'll discuss where you might fit into the large organizations within the federal governments and what careers and federal service might look like for you. Why federal government? We'll discuss why you should choose a job in government by highlighting the benefits of pursuing a federal career. We'll also explore getting into the federal government with different avenues that you can use to get your foot in the door by discussing the pathways, programs, and internship opportunities for students and recent grads. We'll also go over applying for federal opportunities. Now that you've identified the program that best align with your goals and academic standing, we want to discuss with you how to navigate the federal hiring process by covering the USA Jobs, federal resume, and what happens after you submit your application. And we will keep this portion brief as there's a lot of information that with your government week programming that will discuss USA Jobs as well. And with the resources, we're definitely going to share several resources with you as you begin to do your job searches that will hopefully be of assistance to you. And then we'll have a question and answer portion at the end. And with that, I will turn it over to Leia for a government overview.
Thanks, Brittany. So as Brittany mentioned, we just want to do some level setting to get everyone on the same page. So this first slide may seem a little bit elementary, but we think it's important to cover. So public service careers and careers in government can mean many different things to many different people. From working on the Hill to maybe a good government nonprofit organization like the Partnership, those can all encompass public service. When we talk about federal government in this presentation, we are referring specifically to executive branch agencies. That being said, all three branches work together to provide very important services to the American people. None are completely independent of one another. They all work together, but we are specifically focusing on federal agencies in the executive branch. So a quick glance at federal government. So this slide is an overview of the jobs that are available in the executive branch. So the federal government is actually the largest employer in the country, so there is no shortage of opportunities within it. There are more than 370 agencies and subcomponents that make up the federal government. So there are 17 large agencies, including the 15 that are at the cabinet level. There's 25 mid-sized agencies and 28 small agencies. So these are all based off of the number of employees that make up the agency. There's also over 300 subcomponents, which basically just means that this agency operates as a subcomponent of a larger agency. These subcomponents don't necessarily mean small agencies. There's many examples of large subcomponents. So for example, the Census Bureau is a subcomponent of the Department of Commerce. The CDC and the NIH are subcomponents of the Department of Health and Human Services. Those are all very large examples of subcomponents that operate under a larger federal agency. There are over 2.1 million federal civilian employees, and this does not include the about 500,000 Postal Service workers. So as you can see, the federal government is a huge operation, and like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of opportunities within it in all different areas of work. Over 85% of the federal workforce is based outside of the DC area. So the largest concentration of federal employees is in DC with about 15%, but there's opportunities all across the country. There's federal employees everywhere. So if you were to choose a career in federal government, you would kind of be at the epicenter of all things public service. So the federal government has many different stakeholders that they interact with. You'll work within a federal agency, but you'll also interact with other agencies, with Congress, with citizens, the media, and more. The White House, Congress, and even other federal agencies may have some oversight of the work that your agency will do, and you'll be a part of this larger government system. So we like to give a little concrete example of this. So one example is the recent stimulus checks that went out as a result of COVID-19. To mitigate the financial hardships many Americans were experiencing during the COVID-19 pandemic, Congress passed the CARES Act. So as you know, this was a critical element of the aid package, which was a direct payment to certain individuals. So these payments were given out by the IRS, but also they worked with conjunction with the Department of Treasury. Congress had to give the IRS the money to implement this program. And so if you were an employee of the IRS, you would have gotten your direction straight from Congress. You would have worked with many employees at the Department of Treasury, specifically their Bureau of Fiscal Service, and you would work in conjunction with them to actually issue all of these payments. The general public had to be aware that this program was happening. They had to get their questions answered, and so you as an employee would have interacted with the media to keep them up to date on everything that's happening. As you can imagine, there's also direct interactions with citizens who are receiving these payments, answering their questions, getting them the information that they need, and actually sending out the stimulus payments. So you can see how one person in an agency might interact with many, many different stakeholders, and you can see as these issues and different directives grow and grow, you're interacting with more and more people. So now we're going to talk about some common myths about what it's like to work in the federal government. Later, Brittany will talk about all the great things, all the positives. We want to just address head on some reasons that people may not consider federal careers. The first reason is that many people think that government is not innovative or that it's slow and there's a lot of red tape. But we just like to mention that innovation is happening throughout the government. So we'll talk a little bit about some Service to America Medals winners, which are basically people who have won awards for being innovative in government. There's also many ways that government is leading the charge on a lot of important issues. So for example, the first effective drug to treat sickle cell disease, which affects 100,000 Americans and millions worldwide, the first effective drug treatment for that disease was actually founded by an employee of the National Institute of Health. And so government is leading the way in fighting diseases. This is just one example because many people think that the private sector may be better to lead those innovations. There's also innovations happening within the workforce. So the federal government runs a really great virtual student federal service program, which is basically a program that allows people to work remotely. Obviously, you can all see in the past couple of months, we've had to work remotely and make a huge shift that many organizations weren't ready for, but the government had already been leading the way through their virtual student federal service program. So there's many ways that government is being innovative and are able to work around kind of the bureaucracy. The next myth is that you must live in Washington, D.C. to work for the federal government. We covered it a couple slides ago, but only 85% of the federal workforce is located outside of DC. There are also federal opportunities in over 160 countries worldwide. So if you want to work in any state or a large amount of countries, you can and still work for the federal government. The next myth is that the federal government's just not a good employer. Working for a federal agency won't be a great employment opportunity. And so for this, we'll cover the perks and benefits later on, but the federal government can actually be a really great employer depending on what you're looking for. So there's a lot of great benefits when it comes to student loan assistance, when it comes to retirement and health that Brittany will cover. But also many employees do feel engaged and connected to the mission of the work that they're doing. So that's something that we'll come back to time and time again throughout this presentation, is that even more than in the private sector, federal employees feel connected to the mission of their organization. Many federal employees are very mission driven, and they really identify with the mission that their agency is trying to achieve. There is a survey called the Best Places to Work rankings, and 89% of federal employees say the work that they do is important government-wide. There are many agencies like NASA and others where employees are actually more engaged than the private sector, which is really huge. The next myth is that federal government is inherently political. So the civil service is affected by politics. That is very true, but it is not an inherently political system. There's a revolving door of political appointees at the highest level, but the majority of the civil service is nonpartisan and focused on the priorities of the agency. Again, I go back to that mission-driven nature of many federal employees. And so many employees are there because they believe in the mission, no matter who is at the top of their agency. Despite connection to mission being a large source of employee satisfaction, there isn't large turnover from administration to administration, and that's because the mission of the agency stays the same, regardless of who is at the top. And then finally, I must work in public administration to work for the government. So a lot of people think they need a master's in public policy or that they need to be political science or government majors, which is really not the truth. You can work for the federal government coming with any background in any major, and we'll use the next 2 slides to talk about this exact topic. So this is the structure of what a typical federal agency will look like. The federal government is hiring in all fields. Each agency has many different functions, so they need specialists to carry out their mission, but they also need support functions for their operations. So the left-hand side, you can see these support functions. These create an internal process at the agency to get things done. So for example, they need human capital employees that can hire the right people in the agency and run their HR functions. But each agency also is executing on mission. So they need people who are actually running their programs. So if you take the Department of Veterans Affairs as a good example, so they need doctors and nurses and hospital staff to carry out their mission of providing healthcare to veterans. So if you have a science background or you're pre-med, you can work for the Department of Veterans Affairs as a doctor. But they also need employees to carry out support functions. So like any other business, they need those in budgeting and finance and human capital, technology, policy, and more. So each agency is structured in a similar way. Another good example is Department of Health and Human Services. They have people who are working on healthcare policy, but they also have people who are in these more support function roles. So in summary, it can often be hard to imagine a specific job in the federal government because the federal government has nearly every type of job imaginable. This slide just shows you some really generic common fields and the total number of employees that work in those fields. So as you can see, whether you are in a legal field or education, social science, engineering, there's an opportunity in the federal government for you. So a lot of times people will ask, what should I study in grad school to work for the federal government? Or what should I major in undergrad to work for the federal government? And the truth is, really anything that you're interested in, there is an opportunity in the federal government for you. You're not limited by your major in any way. In fact, the federal government is really looking for people who wouldn't normally consider a career in federal government. So for example, cybersecurity talent. There's a huge shortage in the federal government because many people who are technologists or in STEM fields don't see the federal government as a place for them. But in reality, we really need those people in the federal government as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany to talk about some more specific reasons of why you should choose a career in federal government.
Great, thanks. So in this section, we're going to talk about some of the many benefits of working in the federal government. The first is that you can make a huge impact and have a very high level of responsibility. By working with the federal government, you have the opportunity to impact literally hundreds of millions of lives. Every person in the American population comes in contact with the federal government, no matter what gender, race, class they are. Further, the federal government has job opportunities in almost 160 countries worldwide, and your potential impact grows even bigger. For example, if you're interested in healthcare development in underdeveloped countries, you could work for a nonprofit, but you would most likely be working with a much smaller scale, maybe in only one small community. However, if you were to work for the federal government, your efforts can benefit hundreds, thousands, or even millions across the globe by working with nonprofits and creating policy to bring the same work to a much larger scope. Right now, only 6% of the federal workforce is under 30. As the older generation retires, the government will have a big drop in numbers of employees in the near future. And due to this plunge in numbers, the new generation of federal employees will be asked to take on many responsibilities at a very early time in their career as government seeks to fill a high number of high-level vacancies. Because the work you do impacts the lives of many people, everything you do and every project you work on requires a high level of responsibility. Another great thing is the work-life balance. If you're not interested in the typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday work week, that's not a problem at all. The federal government offers employees a flexible work schedule that includes benefits such as flexi time, where employees set flexible work hours. If you like to have options of working from home, all federal agencies have telework policies in place, so employees have the ability to work from home or other convenient locations. And in addition to flexible work schedules, the federal government gives its employees a generous amount of vacation and sick days. Other great benefits also include student loan repayment assistance. If you're worried about paying back student loans, the federal government has 2 really great programs that can help you. Health and retirement benefits. This may not be something that you're thinking about right now, as you'll be starting off pretty early in your career, but the federal government offers some of the most competitive health and retirement benefits. And this is really important in a career, and we encourage you to look into these when applying for federal positions. Then there's also mission alignment. Every year, a report is released that ranks best places to work in federal governments and analyzes various categories of the employee experience based directly on responses to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. Employee skills mission match is government's highest scoring category and has been since the inception of the rankings. Employees of the federal government choose their agencies based on missions that are important to them, and they generally feel the work they do directly supports this mission. So if you want to work for an organization that is mission driven and focused on making an impact, then the federal government is definitely a great choice. There's valuable work experience. Any future employee will recognize federal job experience as something quite valuable. If you decide to leave federal workforce for whatever reason, you will have built a number of skills and gained enough valuable experience to launch yourself into another sector very easily. Further, the skills you gain are transferable from agency to agency within the government. There's training and development. Depending on the agency that you're hired into, there are many opportunities available to you, such as mentors, rotations, and multi-day trainings. Government managers understand the value of continuing education for their employees in order to consistently improve their employee skills. The government offers excellent training and developmental opportunities and has human resources personnel available to help you connect with these opportunities and choose which courses are right for you in your career path. So as Leia mentioned earlier, the Samuel Heyman Service to America medals, or SAMMYs as we call it, highlight excellence in our federal workforce and inspire talent and dedicated individuals to go into public service. So we'll give you a sense of 2 young federal employees who are having, or 3, who are having a tremendous impact in government. We want to highlight Corvelli A. McDaniel and Lorraine Cole, who are 2020 Management Excellence SAMMYs finalists. In an effort to help 149 minority-owned banks grow and earn new revenue, a collaborative team at the Department of Treasury under the leadership of Corvelli McDaniel and Lorraine Cole launched the Treasury Bank Mentor Protege Program in 2018. The initiative established relationships between the largest U.S. commercial banks as mentors and small and minority-owned banks as proteges. A major program objective is to keep small banks owned by African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian or Pacific Islander Americans and Native Americans viable so that they can help address the needs of underserved, low, and moderate to income communities. Dr. Beth Ripley, National Director for VA 3D Printing Network and 2020 Science and Environment SAMMYs finalists. She developed an interconnected hospital-based 3D printing network designed to share resources and knowledge throughout the Veterans Health Administration. This network has grown from 3 to over 30 hospitals and has benefited over 1,000 veterans, reduced surgical times over 1 hour on average, prevented unnecessary surgeries, and more. Most recently and relevant to this time, this network of VA hospitals has begun to design and produce PPE and ventilators to aid in the national coronavirus response. And I'll turn it back over to Leah to discuss getting into the government.
Great, thank you, Brittany. So this next section will talk about different ways to get into the federal government. We know that throughout your government week, you'll have many different presentations on how to actually apply for the federal government, how to navigate USA jobs, etc. So first we want to just give you an idea of different ways that you can, different avenues that you can use to get into government. So we'll talk about internships and fellowship programs, and then we'll give a brief overview of USA jobs as well. But one way to get into government is through different internship and fellowship programs. So the Pathways program are actually 3 distinct programs, all under the umbrella term of Pathways. So the Pathways program was established in 2010 with a directive signed by President Barack Obama, which kind of folded all of these programs into Pathways. So one large benefit of the Pathways programs as a whole is that each of these programs are paid positions, which sometimes if you just get an internship in the federal government under what's called a student volunteer position, those are unpaid positions. But all of the Pathways programs are paid positions. They're also all eligible for conversion after successful completion of their program. So conversion is really just a fancy government term, which means the agency may hire you on full time after you complete the internship or Pathways program that you're going through. This is really important because a lot of times when you do an internship in government, whether that be through like a third party or again, those student volunteer positions, the agency can't hire you on full time unless you just apply to one of their open positions that's available on USA Jobs to the entire public, and then you have to compete for that job. But when a position is eligible for conversion, they can just hire you directly on, which is really helpful both to you because you don't have to go through that competitive application process, but it's also really helpful for the agency because they are building kind of like a pipeline of talent who have already had experience doing the job and now are just going to work directly for the federal agency. So it's really beneficial to all parties involved. So now we're going to talk about the 3 Pathways programs and how they're different from each other. So the first is the internship program. So this is kind of what you think of as your traditional internship. You are at a federal agency for a term, a semester, or a year, depending, the time can vary, but this is really for current students. So it can be high school students, undergraduate students, or graduate students. But you're in the agency for a set amount of time. You get the work experience. You're eligible for conversion after successfully completing it. But this is really just to see if the government is a good fit for you while you're still in school. The next program is the recent grad program. So this is similar to the internship program in that it is, again, it's not a full-time like hiring position just indefinitely. It's for a set term, either 1 or 2 years. So to qualify for this program, you have to be, as the title suggests, a recent graduate. So you can apply to up to 2 years after you finish your undergrad or your graduate degree. And you apply to an agency that's hosting recent grads, and you will go through a 1 or 2 year developmental program. So this is different from the internship program in that they recognize that recent grads are new to the workforce, and they'll want to kind of build up their capacity and their skills in leadership. And so you will get an orientation, and you'll get at least 40 hours of training and development. You'll create what's called an individual development plan, which government uses really often, which is essentially just goal setting and figuring out how you want to grow as a professional, and then they will help you get there by setting different steps along the way to measure your progress. And finally, you'll receive a mentor who will kind of carry you through this program. Again, agencies may convert eligible participants to full-time employment. You just have to make sure you successfully complete all of the program requirements to qualify. Again, you have to apply within 2 years of receiving your degree. If you are a veteran, you have up until 6 years, and this is just because after you graduate, you may have to go and serve, and so you still have time when you return to be eligible for this program. Internship and recent grad program, each agency hires and runs their own program. So you can find these opportunities on USA Jobs or the agency website, but each agency will have their own process, advertise their own position for these programs. They'll just use the term internship or recent grad program to signal to applicants that they are a part of Pathways. Finally, we'll talk about the Presidential Management Fellows Program, often referred to as PMF. So you might have heard of this one. This is government's most prestigious fellowship program designed to create future government leaders. So this is really a leadership development program at the entry level for those with advanced degrees. So different from the recent grads program, you have to have a master's degree or a professional degree, like a JD, to qualify for this program. The application is only open for 2 weeks in the fall. So the application for the class of 2021 will open on September 30th and close on October 14th. The reason that we mentioned that is that they get a lot of applicants, but it's a very short window. And so if you're interested in applying for this program, it's good to know about it in advance so you can start preparing all of your application materials ahead of time to meet that 2-week deadline. You'll want to collect things like letter of recommendations and things like that well in advance. So this program is run centrally through the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, which is an agency that kind of oversees federal hiring. So you apply to this program, and what happens is if you are selected as a PMF finalist, you will get a whole host of government opportunities that are available only to PMF finalists. So you apply to the program, they say you're selected as a finalist, now you get to apply to all of these opportunities across the federal government. When you're a finalist, you're not guaranteed a placement. You still have to apply to these opportunities, but they're only available to PMFs, which is really great. And then once you get selected for one of those opportunities, then you are a PMF. You have a full year to find a position from the time you're finalist. If you have any questions about the PMF program, you can go on OPM's website. They're hosting webinars for the month of September with more information on this program specifically. If you're selected as a PMF, you serve in a 2-year appointment position. So government has a lot of internship and fellowship programs. It's impossible to mention them all. Pathways are really great because they're run by OPM. All of government recognizes those programs, but there are also many, many other internship and fellowship programs. The reason that we're mentioning these is because we think it's a great way to get into government to see if it's for you before you choose a full-time career in government. And so we'll mention just a couple of other internship and fellowship programs, but there is no comprehensive list of all internships in government. There's so many, and we'll cover a couple, but there's a lot. So the next one that we'll talk about briefly is the White House Fellowship. So the White House Fellows Program is one of America's most prestigious programs for leadership and public service. White House Fellowships offer exceptional candidates firsthand experience working at the highest levels of federal government. So selected individuals for this program typically spend a year working as full-time paid fellows to a senior White House staff, cabinet secretary, or other top-ranking government officials. Fellows also participate in an education program consisting of roundtable discussions with leaders from the private and public sector, and trips to study U.S. policy and action both domestically and internationally. Fellowships are awarded on a nonpartisan basis. So again, federal government is not inherently political. You can apply no matter your political affiliation, no matter the administration. To qualify for this program, applicants must have completed their undergrad education by the time they begin the application process. There are no formal age restrictions. However, this fellowship program was created to give selected candidates the experience to serve government early in their career. So it really is for people who have kind of recently graduated. This is a very competitive program, up to 1,000 applications for about 11 to 19 positions. I believe that there were 15 White House Fellows this year. The process consists of interviews before a regional panel, selection as a national finalist, and then you interview before the Commission on White House Fellowships, and then they actually recommend you to the president for selection. Applications open the fall prior to the year that you were to serve. So application for the 2020-2021 class opened November 1st of 2019. And the program runs from August to August. So some other internship and fellowship programs, again, there is no comprehensive list. This is just some. So you can see that there are opportunities all across government. So Cybersecurity Talent Initiative is one program run by the Partnership for Public Service where they place cybersecurity talent in the federal government for 2 years and then the private sector for 2 years. So it's a cross-sector opportunity. And I won't go through every one of them, but you can see that there's opportunities in pretty much every field. So there's some in international relations. Civic Digital Fellowship is for technologists. Haku National Internship Program is run by the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, trying to attract diverse talent into the government. Congressional Innovation Scholars, so this is specifically in Congress. There's ones at the Department of Justice. Thomas Pickering Foreign Affairs Graduate Fellowship is run through the State Department. So you can see there's a whole host of internship opportunities that are also outside of pathways. So if you want to apply to any of these or any others, I think they're a great starting point to get into government. And then finally, additional ways to find executive branch jobs. So agency websites and social media. Sometimes agencies will post their own positions, their own internships on their website. So careers.state.gov is one really good example. The State Department has a whole host of internship opportunities and full-time employment opportunities on that website. There's local and virtual federal hiring events. So there's hiring fairs where you can interact with federal employees. They can tell you about positions available. A lot of people think that networking isn't valuable in the government because they can't just hire you easily like the private sector. But it is really valuable and worth your time to go to these hiring affairs or interact with federal employees so they can keep you aware of positions that exist at their agencies. Again, we already covered this, but government internship programs through your university or through third-party entities or federal agencies themselves are really great ways to find, just to sample more about government and then figure out if a career path in public service is right for you. Government service programs. So we haven't talked much about these, but things like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, where you may not necessarily be working for a federal agency, but you're doing community service work. Those are great ways to get into the government. If you're a recent grad and you maybe you're considering grad school, you want to take a gap year, or you're just looking for some way to serve communities, these are great opportunities. When you return, you'll actually, depending on what program you do, might get preferential hiring treatment. So when you apply for the federal government, they will, basically you'll get preference in the hiring process because you completed one of these programs. GoGovernment.org is another great resource that we'll talk about at the end. And then the best way to apply for any job in the federal government or to find any job in the federal government is to go through USA Jobs. And I'll pass it over to Brittany to talk more about that.
Okay, so in this section, we'll cover the process for actually applying to federal jobs. And we will go through USA Jobs, but we'll keep it brief just because we know that you'll have other sessions that are dedicated to this throughout the rest of Government Week. USA Jobs is the best place to look for federal jobs. It is both the job posting board and an application portal. And here you see a few screenshots from USA Jobs website. And as you can see, they offer a lot of information available. And I highly recommend you creating a profile on USA Jobs. Creating a profile allows you to save your searches based on different filters. You can favorite and then return to positions that you're most interested in, apply to those jobs, and you can also save your master resume and track your applications as well. So the Explore Opportunities tab allows you to see the most urgent hiring needs in the government. If you fit into any of these categories, engineering, for example, you will see those positions in the field. You can also search on USA Jobs using different features. On the right, you can see the narrow your search option. With this, you can apply filters that are relevant to you, open to the public, and student/recent graduates. Filters are a great place to start for you as well. If you fall under any of the additional paths, such as veterans, individuals with disabilities, or members of the Peace Corps, you can even further your individualized searches by these or by location, pay, agency, etc., to find the best opportunities available to you. You can also search by GS level, which we'll go through in more detail on the next slide. Just a quick tip also, after applying all of the desired filters, you can save the search to a USA Jobs profile, and you can revisit the exact search anytime or turn on notifications to receive updates on job announcements if a position is posted that fits your search criteria. Another tip, you can also search USA Jobs using keywords or the job series code, which is a 4-digit number corresponding to the government job category. The USA Job Help Center has a comprehensive list of college majors and job search codes that correspond to each major that we suggest you look at. So a few examples, if you were in engineering, job search code would be 0801, and it goes on from there. 0800 is the catch for all engineering, and then the last 2 digits go more into detail about the specific categories. Okay, so we jump into GS scale. The GS scale determines what level you will be paid and determines the level of the work that, the level of work you'll do. So the scale goes up to GS 15. The lowest grade most of you will qualify for is GS 4, which only requires an associate degree. So what exactly is the general schedule or the GS? The general schedule, GS scale, is the predominant pay scale for federal employees, especially employees in professional, technical, administrative, or clerical positions. More than 70% of employees are compensated according to the general schedule, and agencies do not use the GS system to compare their scale to the GS. The system consists of 15 grades from GS 1, the lowest, to GS 15, the highest. It skips from 5, 7, 9 to 11, then returns back to 12, 13, 14, 15. You automatically reach GS 5 once you've gotten your bachelor degree, or a GS 7 if you have outstanding academic achievement. GS 9 is equivalent to a master's degree, and GS 11 is applied to doctorates. This specific table is based on education, but you'll also qualify with work experience. So if you have a bachelor's degree, but you've been in the workforce for 5 years, you won't be GS 5 or 7. Okay, so the GS scale, as far as pay goes, the GS scale not only determines the kind and level of work that you'll be doing, but also how you are compensated. In the federal government, you're able to know the pay of a position before you start it. As you can see on the table shown, a GS 5 will be paid more in New York than a GS 5 in Atlanta, and this is due to the cost of living for different areas. So the pay would be adjusted. This table also calls attention to the great opportunities for advancement and salary increases available in the federal government. For instance, a top performer in New York City could be eligible for promotion to GS 11 and make just over $73,000, and that's nearly doubling their salary in 2 or 3 years. A step system is also another thing to consider. So each of the 15 grades of the GS pay system has 10 step rates. So steps 1 through 10 that are worth approximately 3% of the employee's salary. As long as the minimum performance requirements are met, each step increases are awarded to you over time. The data on this table comes from step 1, so these are only starting salaries. So obviously you would come in making at least this, but there's opportunity for growth. And a federal employee could be a GS 9 at step 4 and have a higher salary than another employee starting at a GS 9 at step 3. So these are really important job announcements. Other sessions will tell you more about these announcements, but we just wanted to mention them. So just make sure you read the job announcement very closely and in its entirety after finding a job that you're interested in applying for on USA Jobs. All of the information will be located in the job announcement. We've gotten notifications that certain agencies have posted positions or posted announcements, and a lot of the folks who apply don't fully read the job announcement and are immediately disqualified. So just make sure that you're reading the job announcements in detail so that you don't miss any steps when you go to apply. Okay, so what to expect after you apply. After you apply, you can track your application through USA Jobs. The agency will notify you when your application is received. If you meet basic qualifications, they'll let you know when your application is referred to the selecting official and if you're offered the position. And just remember that agencies have a high volume of applicants, so please make sure you're being patient with them as you move through the process. It is okay to follow up with the individual listed in the job announcement, but we generally suggest that you wait 2 to 3 weeks before doing so. If you do choose to follow up, be specific and direct with your request. Make sure you reference the job announcement number. And we will not go into security clearances here, but you can be on the lookout for other sessions throughout the rest of the government week that will cover those details as well. I'll pass it back to Leia.
Great, thank you. So we just kind of want to wrap up with some overall advice, and then on the next slide, some resources to leave you with. And so if anything that you take from this presentation, let it be these things. So first, begin looking or planning as soon as possible. So as we covered early on in the presentation, federal government is a huge entity. There's a lot of different options available to get into the federal government, a lot of different types of jobs available, many different agencies that you could work at. And so if you're interested in working for the federal government, it's always good advice to begin looking and planning early, doing your research on these different agencies, the type of work that they do, positions that are available, etc., to aid in this process. If you want to work for an agency like the State Department or intelligence community, you'll have to go through a long security clearance process, and so you'll want to start that process early as well. Each agency has a distinct process, so make sure you do your research. So as we mentioned with Pathways, each agency is kind of responsible for running their own programs. And while USA Jobs is kind of the central place for all things finding and applying for federal positions, each agency will do things a little bit differently. So make sure you do your research on the specific agency that you want to work for to learn about how they hire. User resources such as the USA Job Help Center and Glossary. So applying for federal jobs can look pretty different than applying for an opportunity in the private sector. We didn't cover it in this presentation because, again, you'll get this overview in a different session during your government week. But for example, a federal resume looks really different than a private sector resume. It's a lot longer, and you have to include really specific information. So you want to make sure that you use the resources that are available to you to make sure that you are doing that correctly. There's a lot of like small nuanced things like that in the federal application process. So you'll want to use all of the resources that are available to you to kind of guide you through the process. And then finally, make the most of the experience. The public sector, federal government is a great employer. There's a lot of great opportunities. And so we always recommend a career in public service, trying it out with like an internship to see if it's for you, but really like make the most of the time that you have in school to research public service and consider it as a career, because we think it can be really rewarding, and it's something that we're very passionate about, that the federal workforce needs talented, smart young people like yourselves, and the federal government is only as good as the employees that make it up. So finally, some resources that we will leave you with. GoGovernment.org is a website that has all the information presented in this presentation centralized on one site. So there's information about federal resumes, there's information about USA Jobs, the background check and security clearance process, and more. GoGovernment also has what's called career guides, which I think are really helpful. They're different pages for different areas of study. So for example, there's a career guide for those in science and engineering. So if you're wondering how your science and engineering degree can help you in the federal government, and we didn't cover it in this presentation as much as you would like, you can go on gogovernment.org and see specific jobs that are available to you. I will show you the gogovernment.org page in just a second if we have time once we finish this, this slide up. The next one is thebestplacestowwork.org. So this is the survey rankings that Brittany and I mentioned in this presentation. It can be a helpful resource as you begin your search because you can find data on what makes each agency a unique place to work. This can also be a great talking point for a cover letter or something to bring up during an interview. Just a good place to learn more about each agency and how engaged their employees are. Agency websites and social media. Although most jobs are posted through USA Jobs, agencies leverage their careers page or social media platforms to promote opportunities. So be sure to follow them on social media if you want to stay up to date on positions and internships. The USA Jobs Help Center breaks down a lot of technical information about the federal hiring process, which I think is a really great resource. So again, they have all college majors posted in the job series code that aligns to them. They have help on federal resumes and background security clearance process. So the Help Center is a really great resource as well. And then finally, Office of Personnel Management, OPM, is the Chief Human Resources Agency and Personnel Policy Manager for the federal government. So occasionally the Outreach Office will host webinars or provide resources for federal job seekers. If you want to contact them at outreach@opm.gov, you can with any general questions about the hiring process or if you're unsure of where else to go. So those are some of the resources that we think will best aid you. And it looks like we have a little bit of time. We will do a Q&A at the end, but I wanted to show you all the GoGov career guides very quickly so you can see more about how your degree might help you find an opportunity in federal government. Give me 1 second. Okay, so as you can all see, this is an engineering career guide that's available on GoGov. They have career guides in many different areas. So for example, program management, biological and environmental sciences, creative arts, education, and more. But this is where you can go to find out exactly how your degree might fit into the federal government. So here there's just a very brief overview of why government needs people with engineering skills. You can see the top agencies with employees in engineering. So if you don't know what agency would be a good fit for you, but you're in engineering, you might say, oh, the Department of Navy has a lot of employees that are in engineering, and that can be a good place to start your search. This is a different breakdown, but it's percentage of employees in engineering. So while the Department of Navy has the most engineers by number, the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board has the highest percentage of engineers as employees. Finally, you can see like the top engineering fields. So general engineering, electronics, etc. What career field is hiring. Top positions by region, so you can see where you might work. Some fun facts, Maryland, California, and Virginia are top 3 locations for federal engineers. So each career guide will have those facts. And then finally, you can see sample positions. So as I mentioned, it can be really difficult to figure out where exactly you'll fit into the federal government because there's just so many types of jobs available. But here you can see 2 positions that have actually either been posted on USA Jobs or actual position in the federal government. You can see the salary, location, and more about what the job actually did. So this is a really great way to actually visualize yourself and how you could fit into the federal government in this large entity. And finally, you can see the job series codes here. So when you go to search USA Jobs, you can just type those in. So again, this is a really great resource. They have them in all different types of areas. We're also working on posting different internships and fellowship opportunities into these career guides as well. So I highly recommend checking that out if you get a chance. But that is all from us. We really hope that you consider a career in public service, and we are happy to answer any questions that you all may have about this presentation.
Great, thank you, Leah and Brittany. Great presentations. A lot of really good information came through. We've had a lot of questions come through, the chat function. So I've been collecting those questions. I'll start just feeding them into right now. So we had a couple questions both around eligibility for the government, whether permanent residents can work for the federal government if citizenship is absolutely required.
That's a good question. So citizenship is a requirement for many federal positions. I will just say that right off the bat. Dual citizenship is generally okay, but U.S. citizenship is required for most federal positions. That being said, it's not required for every single federal position. So don't let that discourage you from still searching and trying to get into public service. There are a number of opportunities that are available to non-US citizens. They are limited in number though.
Great, thank you. We had another question, dealing with the kind of eligibility for pathways in particular. Would students who are completing grad certificates, would that qualify them for a recent grad program?
That's a good question. I don't know that I know the answer to that right off the top of my head. I will say if you've completed an undergrad degree, you obviously would qualify for the recent grads program. However, I am not sure about grad certificates. I'm writing this down, look into it. I will get back to Matt with the answer. Matt, would you be able to send that out? Okay, great.
Of course. Along the same lines, are recent alumni still eligible for the internship program side?
So the internship program, you have to be currently enrolled in a degree program. So it can be high school, undergrad, or graduate, but you have to be currently enrolled in a program. Encourage you to check out recent grads if you are no longer enrolled in school.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the last one in this category, if you're in the process of completing your bachelor's degree, are you already eligible for a GS 5 or 7, depending on your GPA?
It's a good question. So you have to qualify based on education alone, you have to complete the degree or by the time you start. So if you apply to a GS 5 position and you're still getting your degree, that's perfectly fine, but you have to complete it by the time you start. That being said, one, you can qualify for positions, for example, GS 4 positions just require an associate's degree. You can also, the internship program positions, again, great way if you're still receiving your degree to get federal experience. But usually you have to qualify for the GS 5 or 7 level, you have to complete your degree or qualify based on work experience. That's a really good question. There's also a recent executive order I'll just mention here to kind of move away from educational attainment being the sole deciding factor of federal positions. So we're still waiting to see how exactly that's going to play out. But it seems like work experience will be kind of the larger indicator of what level you qualify for. So work experience, that chart that we showed is just based on educational attainment, but work experience is still important as well.
Great. We had a question come in. Is there any age limit on any of these programs?
Nope. The only requirement is how long ago you graduated for the PMF and the recent grads program, but there is not an age limit.
Great. We had a couple questions around being able to do an internship or fellowship while you're in school or working full-time. Can you talk about what that process looks like? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think the default is to work full-time for I'm assuming you're talking about specifically the Pathways internship program or maybe some other third-party entity programs. So I think the default is to work full-time, but you can talk to the agency about work hours. With COVID, they have moved a lot of these internships to work remotely, so they have way more flexible work hours. It's also a really good opportunity if you do like a summer internship at full-time. When you go back to school, they can work with you to lower those hours. So if you were full-time, they can work with you to maybe accommodate your school schedule. We have a former partnershipper who now works for the federal government, and she talks about her internship all the time because she was eligible for conversion. And so she worked with her agency because in order to be eligible for conversion, you have to, they have to convert you. There's a number of days they have to convert you within after you complete your internship. And so they kept her on technically as an intern, even though she was only doing like a couple hours of work per week, but they didn't want that time limit to convert her to expire. So they just kind of kept her on and doing small projects. So that is definitely possible. You don't have to work full time, but it is a good opportunity to maybe start full time in the summer or something and then lower those hours.
Great, thank you. We had a question. If you could repeat the dates for the White House Fellows Program.
Yes, so the application for the White House Fellows Program opens in fall. So for example, if you were to apply, the program runs from August to August. So it's now September, so they just kicked off a class this past August. So applications for this class that just started last month would have opened in November of 2019. So if you're interested in being a White House Fellow next August, you would apply this November. I hope I said that clearly. So it's about, it's almost a full year before the program kicks off that you apply, always the fall before to start the next fall.
We had a couple of questions. Does the federal government help with educational assistance, and if so, is there a certain amount of time that has to lapse before it starts to kick in? It's like 1 year, 2 years before you start to qualify.
That's a good question. Brittany, feel free to jump in on this one because I don't know that I know the answer to this. Each agency does things very differently, and so I know for sure some agencies have specific programs to help with education. One that comes to mind is, I think, the different defense agencies have programs to help people receive degrees in technology-related fields. I believe it's like kind of an internship scholarship program. But I don't know that I know of many other agencies that do that.
Yeah, you're correct, Leah. It really depends on the agency. Once you were starting the application process, that would be a great question to reach out to whoever their human capital person is that's listed, just to get more details about what the loan assistance piece will look like. They may just be able to tell you if there's a certain minimum requirement before they would be able to help you with that loan assistance. For most, it's like once you're in the agency for a year, they'll start the repayment process from there, but you would need to confirm with whichever agency you were interested in working for.
Great, thank you. I think that also leads in another question. Is there a standard amount of time that a student or recent alum should expect to wait before hearing back for a federal application? The student who asked the question in particular said that what they've heard and noticed is that it seems to be about a 6-month period.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A really great point to mention. So federal applications can take a little bit longer. You should be hearing about every 2 to 3 weeks. So if you apply for a job, you should hear, not if you got the job, but you should hear if you're making it through the next step of the process in about 2 to 3 weeks. The average time to hire right now in the federal government is a little over 3 months. So about 98 to 100 days is the average time to hire. That being said, it's going to be a little bit longer for positions in the State Department, positions in the defense or intelligence community, because you have to go through a more extensive security clearance process, and they'll want you to complete that process before you begin. So that's why it can take a little bit longer. The federal government also receives a really high volume of applications, so it can take a little bit longer to get through them. If you don't hear in about 2 to 3 weeks after you apply, if you're making it to the next step, it's totally acceptable to follow up. We just say wait that 2 to 3 weeks to give them some time, but it should on average take about 3 months.
Great. Thank you. We had a question come in, so in order to qualify for the GS5, GS7 level based on education, does your degree have to be in the field of the position to which you're applying? This example was, I have a music education degree, but potentially interested in positions outside of education.
Good question. So I apologize that this is the answer to many things in federal government, but it can often depend. So the short answer is probably yes, it will need to be relevant, but there's a lot of different ways that you can show it's relevant, right? So if you're applying to a cybersecurity job, you may not be able to show that your degree is relevant, but if you have a degree in any sort of liberal arts or kind of a more general degree, you can apply that to many different positions and many different fields. Program analyst is a really common job title in federal government, and they take a wide variety of backgrounds and majors. So if it's relevant, you can usually make it work. That being said, for the more technical positions, you have to qualify based on receiving a degree in that specific field.
Great. Thank you. We had a question. Does doing AmeriCorps count towards federal work experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say any experience that you have, whether it's federal government or not, counts as work experience on your federal application. So I'll start there. AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, etc. Yes, those are great opportunities. So when you apply for the federal government, you actually will get preferential hiring based on your service in AmeriCorps. So yes, absolutely counts. Good question.
Great. We had a question built around one of the job series, the 1102 contracting series. Is that a broad range of different kind of contracting jobs, or is it something more along the lines of defense contracting?
That's a great question. Let me have the job series code up right now. 1102. So it looks like it's under accounting. So I would say look on USA Jobs at the specific position, but it doesn't look like it's specific to defense contracting. I believe what it's referring to as is contracting for any services. And it'll depend on the agency what exactly that refers to.
Yeah, and through my experience, I wouldn't be surprised that's dealing with like stuff around procurement, things in that area.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We had multiple students actually, ask about are there any agencies or jobs that you would especially recommend for those with a geography degree?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know if there's any I would specifically recommend. It depends on what you're interested in. I know on the USA Jobs Help Center, because I just looked this recently, geography has a lot of community planning jobs available. There's also a lot of the international relations or foreign affairs positions actually fall under geography for whatever reason. So that's also a really interesting one. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out that USA Jobs Help Center. It has each major listed. I think you'll find a lot of good opportunities there. But I know there are some in geography and community planning, foreign affairs, and international affairs.
Great, thanks. We had another one. So you mentioned that there's a higher number of current employees who are approaching retirement in the next few years, and that ideally newer generation will be able to come in and replace them. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of training is typically available for new employees into the government?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically there's a lot of different training opportunities available. So typically new employees will create the individual development plan, the IDP, that can kind of help you goal set and figure out where you want to be in the future. So that's just one opportunity. You'll work with your supervisor to create that. There's also mentorship opportunities. So a lot of agencies have a mentor program for new employees. I know GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has really great mentorship opportunities available. So you can kind of learn from someone who's been in government for a while. There's also rotational opportunities available. So you can get experience at one agency and then do like a detail or a rotational assignment at another agency if you're interested in getting kind of cross-agency opportunities and learning and development. So those are kind of the big categories that I can think of. But it depends on the agency. There's a lot of different training opportunities available. Brittany, is there anything that you want to add on that one?
No, I was just going to say the mentorship piece. A lot of agencies have their own mentorship program. So that's one of the main ones that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. And then the only thing I'll also throw out there too is there's a lot of leadership development programs. So federal agencies, I think they're required to have a certain number of hours or training opportunities available to employees. So the Partnership for Public Service, outside of the federal workforce team, our largest team is actually our leadership development team. So they host leadership programs for federal employees all the time. There's many other organizations that do this, but essentially federal employees get day-long training or week-long training over a series of months to help build like their leadership skills, leadership capacity. And so federal government has all of these opportunities. And so if you're an employee, you will be able to maybe go through one of these programs as well.
Great. We have a question about veterans preference. The student has had difficulty as not the most qualified, as the response, in USA Jobs, and how likely is it to be able to get hired without veterans preference?
Great question. So I'll explain a little bit about how veterans preference works, which will hopefully give you some more context. So when you apply for a federal job, the first thing that they're going to check is whether or not you meet the minimum qualifications. So there's certain either degree requirements or work experience required, et cetera, that you have to show that you have to meet those minimum qualifications. Then they create a pool of everyone who meets those minimum qualifications and send them off to another hiring manager to look through to choose the best candidate. The way veterans preference works is that veterans are in that general pool with everyone else to make sure they meet those minimum qualifications. But if they do meet those minimum qualifications and are passed on, the veterans will automatically rise to the top. So they've met the minimum qualifications and now they rise to the top, and hiring managers will have to choose from one of the veterans, most qualified veterans. If the veterans don't meet the qualifications, they don't get the job. So it's not like they're just hiring veterans that don't meet those qualifications. So to answer the question of how likely are you to get the job, it honestly all depends on who applies. If a veteran applies and they meet those minimum qualifications, it is true, yes, they're likely to get the job. That's why veterans preference exists. But there's plenty of people who get federal positions without being a veteran. It all just depends on who's in the applicant pool at the time. And so the best thing that we can say for this is really just making sure your application is as good as you can possibly make it. Don't get disqualified in that minimum qualification round by not reading the job announcement, including all the correct information. Be sure to make the application in the best of your ability, and then an opportunity will come. It just might take some time. That's a great question.
Great. Is there a way, to be able to look for opportunities, for those students who are not citizens yet to be able to narrow their search?
That's a good question. Let me look on USA Jobs. I'm not sure if you can filter by that. Let's see. Yeah, I don't believe there's a way to filter by that, but the job announcement will tell you whether or not it's only open to US citizens. I just searched non-US citizen. Some jobs did come up, but I haven't read through the job announcements in detail enough to tell you if that is actually the case. So yeah, I would just recommend looking through those job announcements. I know that's not an entirely helpful answer, but.
Okay. We had a question come in directly for each of you, actually. So Leia and Brittany, how did you get involved with government?
Brittany, you want to take that one first?
Sure. So I actually have never worked for federal government. Most of my career has been in nonprofit. My previous employer working with workforce development programming, working closely with local government. And so I transitioned over to working closely with federal government without actually for federal government, but still in a workforce capacity. So that's how I ended up with the partnership.
Great. And the partnership introduced me to federal government as well. I was actually an intern at the partnership before I started working here full time. I had worked previously in the Ohio Senate, so had experience with public service, but didn't necessarily know that I wanted to work with the executive branch or federal government specifically. I just wanted to get experience in all different areas of public service. So that led me to the partnership, which led me to the federal workforce team, which is how I've experienced government. Never actually worked directly for the federal government, though.
All right. I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to pick out one last question out of here right now. What should we do if we aren't clear about some of the details in the job announcement? Is it okay to contact the hiring manager directly to clarify?
Yes, that's a good question. So I would say read the job announcement in its entirety to make sure you can't find the answer. If you can't, there is a contact number and email on each job announcement that you can absolutely reach out to. For this, I would say, number one, just make sure your question is specific. So I was wondering if I could apply, before I get my degree, and the job announcement doesn't say, can I apply before I finish my degree? Something along those lines. Also, make sure you reference the job announcement number in the email. So each job announcement will have a number that corresponds to that specific job. One hiring manager can be responsible for a number of positions, so you want to make sure you reference the specific job you're applying for. But yes, you can contact the hiring manager directly to clarify.
Great. So, like I said, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'd like to thank you both, Leia and Brittany, for spending well over an hour with us, with our students, informing them about all things government, all the options that are out there. I know if we had more time, we could probably talk about this for days upon days, straight with all the different details that are out there. But hopefully, this has given students a good baseline, from which to be able to, build upon, moving forward. Students, thank you for coming out. We do have 2 more events later on today at 4 o'clock. We will have our Writing Your Federal Resume session, and then at 6 o'clock, Navigating USA Jobs. So 2 items that both Leah and Brittany briefly introduced during their presentation, a natural lead-in to going more in depth on that later on this afternoon. So again, I want to thank both of you for coming out and logging on today, I guess is a better way to put it, in fall of 2020, to be able to share with their students. And again, thank you, students, for participating and having some great questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you all who came. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.